Welcome to episode number 334 of Destination Linux, your favorite video podcast. My name is Jill.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Michael.
In this week's episode, we discuss making open source illegal. What? We're not making this up. There are people who are pushing for this very thing. Then we're going to give you some upbeat news about Zorin OS to make up for the first topic. Also, we have some feedback on telemetry. Plus, we have our tips, tricks, and software picks. All this coming up. Let's get on the road towards Destination Linux.
In our community feedback this week, we got a message from Steven.
Hi,
he says,
Steven. I think we should all say hi at the same time. Sorry, continue, Michael.
That's not awkward. Hi, Steven. Come on, people. 3, 2, 1. Hi, Steven.
There we go. You got to see the video version for the full effect. Yeah.
That was so well polished and not awkward in any way. So Steven says, he says, hi, just listening to you talking in Destination Linux episode 333 about telemetry on Linux and OS market share. As far as I know, the market share data is collected from web telemetry, such as user agents and the like. You advocate for telemetry on the desktop to improve the telemetry, and this would certainly increase the Linux market share a bit, but I think the numbers would be less meaningful than the web data. From my university days, I know many people who were or are using Linux within VMs or dual booting Linux whenever they need to work on an operating system class homework. In tech forums, I often read where people are using Linux VMs for certain tasks or trying out some other distros. So I believe there might be a sizable number of occasional Linux users who genuinely stay on other systems.
Well, here's the thing. It's an interesting thought. Can we get the data we want from a website traffic? But then the question pops in my head of what website? And then if we're getting all of our data from website tracking, then what's the difference of allowing, say, Ubuntu or Fedora to actually have access to that same data, to know the same data that we're apparently willing to freely give in a web browser from its actual user base? And so what is the single website we all would go to capture our records? Number one would be my question there, because otherwise you're going to have a bunch of different websites who are collecting this data for whatever purposes they have. And I, as a Linux user, may not go to that site. And that's why that's not really a reliable way.
Well, there is a website service and system that does have the data and has basically every data for every website. And that is called Google Analytics. And they will not tell anyone anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, very true.
Google would probably be one of the main ones there, but a lot of Linux people wouldn't use Google; they'd use DuckDuckGo.
No, I'm saying Google Analytics is on almost every website. Not every website, but almost every website. So if you go to a website that has, if you go to any of the news websites for Linux, Google Analytics, it's on there. So it is being tracked. So Google has that data. But the problem is that Google will not share that data based on, their track record of never doing that. So I do think it's interesting as a point of saying that web traffic is where because this is where the data is coming from. It was from statcounter.com or .net, I'm not sure. And they said that they are a 1.5 million website network. They don't say what websites are a part of the network or how that is calculated at all, but it is an interesting data set that I think is valuable in the terms of that's a pretty large data set. However, there are also billions of websites or trillions of websites. So in the grand scheme of things,
you're missing a lot of users there.
Yeah, there's a ton we don't know about.
Steam. Yeah. Steam's really popular. They pull distro information, but we don't assume that every single person in Linux utilizes Steam. So therefore, I don't assume that there's only 3% of entire people using operating systems that only use Linux in there. That's just what Steam has. So I still think it's an interesting point. I think it is the best data we have for what Steven's saying.
Sure.
But I do think we need something additional if it's done well. The key thing people were missing somehow in the Fedora discussion was the fact that they're working with the community to figure out, is there a way to do this ethically? Right. And they are putting every stopgap in place to make sure throughout the entire process that the community is involved, they're hearing people's voices, that they're not collecting anything they shouldn't, that they're open sourcing every piece of it. They're doing what we would want somebody to do if they were going down this road. So to me, it's like, let's encourage that, because they're not the only company that's going to be now interested in Linux. And if Fedora can create a really ethical way of doing this right, then that's what I want them to adopt. But website traffic, the other thing is ad blockers, VPNs, other things. Like, especially a lot of people in Linux are very attuned to their security and privacy. They're not going to get picked up in those stats.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that I just think.
There's even like anonymizer extensions where it makes a Linux user look like a Windows user. And there's people who are using that, promoting that, and that sort of thing. So I think that it's still good data to have, as far as like having telemetry can help promote the platform, and having it on the OS level. I understand why people would be concerned about that, but there are ways to do it, even if, like, this is the most important piece. A lot of people are talking about how it's a slippery slope and all that sort of stuff.
True.
And that's true for literally everything. That means you should never do anything and never leave your house. There's always something that could go wrong.
Going outside is a slippery slope.
Exactly.
First, you go to the store to get groceries. Next thing you know,
it reminds me of that. There's a Lonely Island song about, I forgot what it's based on the acronym YOLO. And instead of, you live only once, they basically say the exact opposite, and you should never take any risk whatsoever. So you ought to look out.
Yeah,
and it's pretty good. It's a pretty good song. It's a pretty good song. And how ridiculous it is.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
Yes. The thing I think about as far as the OS level telemetry is that the part that I want to happen doesn't have to be a lot. It could be literally just a machine ID and nothing else. If that was collected, that would be useful enough to say how many users of Linux we have.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to say, I will submit that information and nothing else, I think that's totally fine. It's just the idea of like no telemetry whatsoever, and there is never a time where it's okay. That part, I think, is arguably detrimental.
In fairness,
to
I
Linux.
hate telemetry. Like, it's been a battle to get rid of what the corporations have done with telemetry.
Oh, I agree.
Sucking every piece of information out. So I want people to be clear, like, we are not for telemetry. I can speak for myself and say I'm 100% not for it. And I spend way too much time figuring out how to get around it. With that said, I think there is use to some data out there that could be useful to companies, that could help Linux actually show its size and things.
Which
and
GPUs are being used.
You can do it ethically, and Fedora's discussion, because it wasn't like they've implemented anything. Fedora's discussion on it is a way to try to figure out, is it possible that we can do this in a really ethical manner? And I support that. I don't think the website situation is enough. It just misses too many. And I think VMs should be counted, by the way.
Yeah.
Mac OS doesn't go around and go, hey, you primarily are a Windows user, so we're not going to capture your number as an Apple user. We're just going to capture you as a Windows user over there. If you use Mac 1% of the time in your home and you boot that up, they're counting you as a user of Mac. And the same thing with Linux. Like, yes, somebody may install it, they may boot it up, they may use it for a little bit, they may not. They go back to Windows and they start using it. I still think that Linux instance that was installed counts as a user. And
they're also they are still using it, so they're a user, right? Absolutely. No matter how much time they're using it, they're still a user. And most importantly, there are people who use it for a particular purpose because they also have other purposes that they need Windows for and can't get away from them. So they have to do a dual boot situation. And and my perspective is, if Linux was seen as a bigger platform, or actually the size it really is, then there would be more software being made for Linux, and possibly the reasons why they couldn't move in the first place would be eliminated, and then they would move.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time it's just access to applications.
And we get
so true.
Hardware.
And the other thing is, there's so many Linux users out there running headless systems. Even I have one running in my house.
Well, we didn't
shocking
that, Jill.
Jill has a headless system.
You have 1,000 computers. I assume a few of them are headless. In there.
Speaking of that, Stephen also goes on to say that, secondly, OS level telemetry could count individuals multiple times. Jill would probably count as 1,000 users.
As she should.
It's more an upper bound to the number of users. I think they should, because if you are using a system multiple times, then that system is valuable. It's not like one individual person only has one computer. There are people who don't use anything but their phones, but have multiple phones, because some applications are available on one, like iOS, and one on Android, and that sort of thing. And the same thing can be applied to Windows and Linux and Mac, and
I
etc.
promise you, Apple is not sitting there going, well, we're going to deduplicate our data. They have 4 Apple computers in their house, but we're only going to count it as one user. No, they're counting all 4.
They know, based on Apple, how Apple works with the Apple ID system, they know how many devices you have, and they know if you are a duplicate person, and they're still counting it.
Because they use good telemetry.
Exactly. Yeah. But I like the way you're thinking. I think people's hearts are in the right place here. I really do. Like, people are scared of this because they don't want Linux to be turned into the garbage that everything else is.
Right.
And so our hearts are in the right place, but we also want to try to, make Linux continue to grow in popularity. And can you, and that's a question, can you do it in a way that's ethical? I'm really interested to see what Fedora and the community, because we're working very closely with the community, can come up with there. And I think there is ways that you can do it ethically. And then those ways that it's done ethically, if it can still gather information that's useful, then it could be used as the guideline for how anybody who wants telemetry in Linux needs to follow. And any company that doesn't use it, that's when we get our pitchforks and our torches out, and we go yell and scream at them and call them dummies and all that stuff, and we win. And so that's how I look at all this.
I like that, especially the whole yelling and screaming at somebody who deserves it.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the fun part.
I saw a comment about how people left Windows because of the telemetry, and I do completely understand why you would do that. I left before they added telemetry, and even then they were doing horrible stuff. But my point here is, the reason I brought that up is that just because Microsoft did telemetry improperly doesn't mean that it can't be done properly.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well said.
This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by LINBIT. LINBIT has been keeping digital businesses running for over 20 years. They're the makers of open source products like DRBD, which is high availability software that has been part of the Linux kernel since 2010, and LINSTOR, industry-leading open source software-defined storage. LINBIT has an active presence in the open source community, and they collaborate with the community to help identify and build new features. LINBIT provides enterprise-grade software that runs on a variety of platforms and OSs without vendor lock-in. What that means is that you could use the software on any platform, including specific hardware that you want to use, or just off-the-shelf hardware that you get and connect it. All of this stuff can be interchanged really easily. And with DRBD and LINSTOR, you can have high-speed replicated block storage in almost any configuration, whether it's Kubernetes, Apache Cloud, or OpenNebula. There's even DRBD proxy for long-distance replication. LINBIT is run by its founders to this day, and all of its engineers and developers are in-house with offices in Europe and North America, which allows them to have global 24/7 support to complement their enterprise offerings. Visit linbit.com to learn more about the people behind LINBIT and the awesome software for block storage, duplication, and more.
So Jill kind of gave us this really good opener of, are we going to make open source illegal? And no, this isn't clickbait. I mean, I guess it could be kind of clickbaity, but it's actually true. It's not clickbaiting that we actually have people who are trying to make the case that open source should be completely illegal and not be in the general population's hands when it comes specifically to AI and open source. Mm-hmm. So,
and shockingly, it's politicians who don't know anything about technology.
True. Very true. That's usually typically what happens. This topic is really growing steam because there are a lot of institutions out there that are looking into this matter of what regulation should we have, what guardrails should we have when it comes to AI? And open source has become a big part of this topic. So before we get into any further, I kind of want to talk about just real quick, like, what makes open source so amazing? Like, why is this something that we need to keep around? Most of the people in our audience know this. We have a lot of new listeners as well. To me, one of the biggest things is closing the digital divide. Mm-hmm. Now, the digital divide says that, hey, this budding artist, this amazing kid with all this incredible talent may not have the financial resources to go pay for all these licenses for all of these tools like Adobe tools or other things to be able to create the stuff, or these music studio tools to be able to create music and all of these things. And open source, being that a lot of this software is freely available to people, allows that digital divide to be closed. And now that person who wants to be an artist actually has access to tools professional tools that will allow them to pursue their dreams and goals versus just somebody who has money being able to do that and everybody else being left in the dust. And then on top of that, you've got the community aspect of it. I mean, that's a big part of the show, how it grew from very small community to a very large community was all because of the amazing community, people coming in and really supporting us. Even my YouTube channel was a testament to the community because I never planned to stick with Linux. Like I was going to go back to Windows, but I made these Linux videos and you all wouldn't leave me alone. So here I am and I couldn't leave. It was
in a good way. They wouldn't leave you alone in a good way.
Yes. They were all very nice and kind.
And then he joined Destination Linux as a host. And then I did. And we met on this show.
Yeah.
So this is kind of crazy. And actually, I think Jill met us from the show too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. So this whole community thing is much greater than just
proof.
Like it happens all the time in a variety of ways, and then sometimes you make a podcast from it.
Yeah, exactly. And it made software fun again. Open source makes software fun because you can tweak it, you can hack it, and you don't have all these limitations with licenses. Every time I work on friends' computers and things, and some software is not working, and I'm like, oh, well, you need to re-register this thing, and you go through this process, and then they're like, oh, I lost my license key, and then they've got to potentially rebuy it. It's just so annoying, and I'm so thankful for Linux during those times because I'm like, I don't have to mess with all these obnoxious license keys that rarely work anyways, except to annoy the people who aren't trying to steal it. That's the only people that suffer from it. So, but the creativity to go in there and modify the software any way you want, and then the free mentorship. Like you are dealing with some of the greatest software developers in the industry, people who work in some of the biggest companies who also donate their time to create open source software. You have the ability to just go out there and just chat with. Like we bring them on the show. I remember when we were starting this podcast, that would like freak me out that we get to talk to some of these people that I looked at as heroes that were creating some of this software and distros. And we were just talking to them on the show. I mean, how difficult as a small podcast at that time would that have been? Now we get to get big names like Shuttleworth on, which is really awesome. But, just the ability to talk to those people is amazing.
Go check out the latest episode that we just released on the channel, the interview we did with Mark Shuttleworth about Canonical and Ubuntu, because if you don't know, he was the creator and founder of both.
Yeah, very cool stuff. And Michael's created a lot of awesome shorts out there as well to get a bunch of new people into Linux and interested because it was really interesting.
We even put it on TikTok.
Yes, we did.
No, we did.
Just
Did we?
started a new
Yes, we did. I created a TikTok
account. That was against I had nothing to do with that, people. My name is Ryan, by the way, because you all yell at me for everything. That was Michael who put it on
TikTok.
a
comment on the TikTok post that said, hey, I've been learning about Linux recently, and I'm glad that TikTok knows it and showed me this. So there you
go.
Look at that. All right. We're using it as a recruitment platform. So obviously with all this good news, it's time to make this thing illegal because there's too much of a good thing.
Exactly.
We got to ban
because we joined TikTok and it's time to make it illegal.
Yes, absolutely. That one I might agree with there a little bit. But the general idea here, again, AI is too dangerous for the general population. Open source would give everyone access to AI potentially, right? People out there would start programming. Well, they already are writing programs, PyTorch, all of these things that have AI implementations in them. That's too dangerous to be in an open source world where those guardrails that are put in place, by the way, can be removed. They could be edited, they could be adjusted, and then what happens? So the thought process, I think here, if I'm following along, is if we ban open source, we'll all be safer because then just a few mega corporations and governments will have access to it, and they've always been trustworthy.
Yes. There has never been a time where that has backfired.
Yeah.
That's a really hard argument to go against. Like, man, all these companies are so good and the government cares about me. So sure.
And they would never do anything against you, like track you or nothing. Never.
Exactly. Talking about telemetry. Bad telemetry.
So, with that said, there are some concerns that I think are valid because the AI stuff that is being made is it's sketchy. And I think that it is very interesting, very powerful. There's the things that are talking about how jobs are going to be removed for people who are not willing to learn how to use these tools. Those people are the ones who are going to suffer from being left behind and that sort of thing.
Well, and I think there's a little bit of truth to that, but I think there's also some truth to the other side that some jobs could be replaced with AI.
Oh, sure.
The current iterations of AI are not all they've been hyped up to. There's a lot of industry company hype going on. NVIDIA is now worth $1 trillion because of AI and all this stuff. And then you use ChatGPT and ask it to, summarize an article and it gets it all wrong. Like, I'm not exactly sold on this idea that this is going to replace everybody's job. I think it's kind of like the internet.
I think it's just a tool. But that's a good point about the internet. It is basically the same thing was said about the internet. And I think that you could argue that there are definitely pockets of the internet that are horrible. And the AI thing could also be something like that, where there's pockets of it that are horrible. But how dangerous is that? I don't know. And I think it's reasonable for people to have a discussion about potential issues and the regulations about it that may or may not need to exist, or that sort of thing. I don't think it's irrational or just insane that people are talking about the idea of the AI stuff needing to be discussed. I think it's insane that they're trying to attach the open source part of it to it as if somehow the open source concept is dangerous.
Yeah, the companies that close source it, they're good. They'll use it in all trustworthy manners. Yeah, if you put it in the public's hands, that's bad, because we would have something like Linux where it's free to use for everybody and everyone can enjoy it, and that would be terrible. So what are we talking about specifically, though, here? A few examples. European Union has been working on the AI Act, which would ban API access to generative AI models. It would also sanction open source developers and software distributors like GitHub if unlicensed models became available. So the general idea here is that you would need to be licensed by the government first before you could open source this stuff or give it away freely, which we know that would be something that would cost a lot of money. And additionally, a lot of people
$20 a year is what I think is, or 20 million. I see. Never mind.
Well, it includes fines of $20 million for people who break it. So, I mean, are you willing to put your entire livelihood at risk? Well, it's monopoly money. That's euros. So I'm not sure how much that actually is in freedom dollars, but
freedom units.
Yeah.
But we're joking, by the way. But I think that that's going to keep a lot of people from just open sourcing it all together. That's going to put a lot of restrictions. GitHub's going to have to be put in place for people who don't know it and put stuff up there anyways. This creates all kinds of problems, but they're not alone. The US government is looking into rules and regulations around AI and safeguards as well. And additional regulations are under consideration, such as one proposed change from the Council of EU to specifically regulate open source general purpose AI, creating legal liability for open source models out there. So people will be sued and their work destroyed and things like that. And this is a really interesting time here for AI and open source.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I think is a very good option, for at least for now, as we're, growing into the world of AI, is that there is actually an open letter which has received a lot of support from famous names in tech. And it's calling for a moratorium on AI development for 6 months. And the letter is signed by 1,125 people, including Elon Musk and Apple's co-founder, Steve Wozniak, or the Woz. We love him.
Well, if Elon signed it, then obviously we care.
He put an X on it.
I care.
He put his X on it.
I care because Woz signed it.
I like Steve Wozniak.
Yeah, well, the Woz, sure. I'll give that one, but it's just funny that the comments about it on the article was like, Elon said it, and it's like, but
I know.
Also Elon says
a lot of crazy stuff.
But see, this is where this is where I kind of have a problem, though. Like, I get the idea of putting a pause on it, but then if the EU and US put a pause on it, do we really buy the fact that the government's not continuing full bore in their research, that the corporations aren't continuing full bore in the research, and the only thing that's really getting a pause is our ability to know what they're working on until it's too late?
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to stop because China or other countries out there are not going to be disinterested in AI either. They're very interested in it. They're going to keep working on it. So we're going to be the only two countries that are like, oh, we'll all just stop our AI research.
I think,
you guys
Brian, you're forgetting a very important piece of Team America World Police.
Yeah.
There you go. Our world police will take care of that situation for sure.
I do think, though, actually putting a pause on it only so we can get those guardrails in place or a better framework, like we have been talking about here on Destination Linux over the past few months. How, like even NVIDIA is working on a guardrail framework.
Whoa,
AI.
chill. NVIDIA wants to make those open source, which with these laws would destroy those guardrails, because of course open source would never be used for good.
Yes, never.
Yeah, but just like a think tank to think about it. And I really think right now is a really good time for the Linux Foundation to kind of step up and really start working on this. They started a consortium of different companies to start talking about AI, but I think that would be a really good company to start to really work on this.
If we had a collective of trying to work on creating the guardrails and the frameworks and the securities around the idea of AI, I think that would be great. And there are companies already doing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of ridiculous that these acts are trying to be made to block those sorts of things. In fact, they should make it where those are more important and give funding to those things so that those things happen faster, because
Absolutely.
the AI is not going to stop, right?
Yeah.
The people who've started doing it, it's not going back. Like the genie's out of the bottle, right? So
yeah.
At the best we can do is try to secure and put the guardrails up as fast as possible, and that should be the focus. And I think that holding it back is an understandable concern, because how far will it go and how far could it be taken is also something that is arguably worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
But also we wouldn't know unless we did it in the first place. So it's more of like, it's a fear-mongering sort of thing. So part of me completely understands why that open letter was made and completely understands why the politicians are afraid of this. And then the other part of me just is hopeful. So I guess I'm a little
don't even know how
torn.
A computer works.
They don't
even know how social media works.
That is very true.
We're
in a lot of
talking
cases.
about AI here, and I have no doubt they have no clue how any of this stuff works.
Yeah.
And so
I have no doubt about that for sure. I have no idea how it works, so they definitely don't.
I like to do my homework for every show. And so for this show, I was like, what could I study this week to be prepared to discuss this topic and really be like one of the key insightful hosts on this topic? And so I chose Terminator 2. And I watched Terminator 2 again this weekend. And I really did. And first of all, I have to say Terminator 2 still holds up perfectly.
It does. It's amazing.
Amazing movie.
Even the special
Absolutely.
effects, like
Incredible.
the T-1000, like when it goes from like goes through the bars,
Oh,
still
yeah.
fantastic. Like it
blows
still
my mind how good it is. So Skynet, is a thing that's kind of like AI, and this is where a lot of science fiction has made this fear of AI and what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, you could take all of these arguments that we're making about AI, that it could create all kinds of nasty comments. It can steal people's work. It can, teach people how to do nefarious things. And you could say all of those things are 100% also true with the internet. And we put guardrails in place to a degree with the internet, but at the end of the day, it's still the wild, wild west. You can go on the dark net. There are many sites out there where you can learn to do very nefarious things. And there's no way to stop it or put that genie back in the bottle, if you will, because it grew faster than you could put controls in place. And AI is the same way. We can't put this genie back in the bottle. The open source versions of AI already exist, and these regulations will do nothing but hurt the small people who are trying to get this out to the masses so that one group does not have an completely unfair advantage over another. Now, the internet creates a completely unfair advantage to those who do not have internet access. And yes, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the US, kids who have no access to the internet to do their homework and things. They're at a complete disadvantage to kids who have access to the internet, who don't have to sit there and manually flip through encyclopedias and things to get their answers. And so, this is something where the digital divide again comes in. But AI is going to be the same thing. If kids don't have access to AI because it's locked behind a few corporations that want to charge monthly fees or have all these specifications of what you can do with it, but they can do whatever they want with it, then we're creating, again, more of this unfair platform that we're already living through, especially here in the US.
Yeah. And Ryan and Michael, every time we've had a new form of communication, whether it be TV or radio, some people want to ban it. It progresses the human condition and us as human beings. And people thought that when the TVs came out, TV will make people stupid. And when the invention of the radio...
Reality shows
right on
didn't help.
Okay.
No,
I kind of feel like people did get stupider once the TV got.
I mean, we
now
have,
I'm on the other side.
Shows
Maybe
on
we
Netflix.
need to regulate this.
We have a show on Netflix called Is It Cake?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yes.
Like what?
And,
so
yeah.
No, but good point. Fair point, except for the TV. Yeah, continue.
Well, the other
TV is still fantastic. Just sometimes not so much.
The other invention is radio, which would, make people less productive at work. But in reality, what they would do is they'd have a full day of work, go home, listen to the radio in their living rooms with their family, and be rejuvenated for the next day of work. Of course, this is the same thing with the invention of the internet. Every time we have a progress in communication, there are people that freak out. It's just life.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting because every single time these new technologies come out, people talk about how it's going to ruin society. And reality shows aside, there are also people who are saying that it's also going to destroy the previous technology. And radio is still a thing. We still have radio. We still have TV.
Really? I thought it just became Spotify. My bad.
I mean, there's also, Sirius XM and stuff. So that's radio technically. And there's also people obviously live TV is not as popular as it used to be because when it was the only option, obviously it was more important in that case. But now we have a thing where you can still watch live, like live sports is still a thing. And that people were worried about like Netflix taking over and destroying live TV. And that didn't happen either. It just made a new medium for people to enjoy for those who prefer to use that kind of medium. And I think this is a similar situation where AI is going to be beneficial to some and others are going to completely ignore it.
Yeah.
And the internet is still going to continue to exist. Probably. I mean, we don't know. And like the Terminator's reference that Ryan mentioned, who knows what could happen. But I just want to clarify one thing. I am welcoming our robotic overlords. I mean protectors, and just so they see this in the future and know that I'm a good one.
I'm a good one.
Now we all know TV didn't make us stupid because we love Star Trek. And Star Trek progresses society.
That's not television.
I mean, there was also Picard season 1.
Yes, and the next.
So,
oh no.
Yeah.
No.
Well, if you guys watch,
not all of Star Trek is fantastic.
Season 2 of Picard is the awesomest Picard.
Yeah. If you watch the documentary Idiocracy, you'll see where society is headed without AI. So,
Season 3, yes.
The documentary.
Yeah, it's a documentary at this point.
Season
for those who have not seen that movie, you should definitely watch that movie. It is so interesting. I want to see people do like reaction videos of never having seen Idiocracy and then watching it. Because when you watched it when it came out or like before the craziness that it became, like it sort of became reality. And parts of it, when I watched it hadn't happened yet. I was like, oh, this is hilarious. This will never happen. And then people who watch it now seem depressed by it.
Oh,
yes. Because it's a documentary at this point.
Yeah, you're right, Michael. Season 3 of Picard, but I wanted to say 2 because without 2, not 1 and 2 not doing so great.
Jill, we have moved on from Star Trek. Please,
we moved on from Star Trek, and we also have moved on from Idiocracy. But I'm going to pull it back to Idiocracy anyway because there was this really interesting interview with the guy who's the director of Idiocracy, and he said that he wanted to find the stupidest shoe ever he could find. And that it would never work and no one would ever buy it. So he can make everyone in Idiocracy wear those shoes because he knows that it's so ridiculous that it would never catch on. And that was the Crocs.
Oh, gosh. Oh,
and here we are. It's a documentary.
Here we are.
I'm telling you.
It is definitely.
Oh, my gosh. I need to watch that. I haven't seen that one. Crocs aren't my favorite shoe. They're comfortable, but they're just ugly. Sorry.
No offense to anyone wearing Crocs out there.
They are comfortable. I do like them.
Enjoy your Crocs.
No offense.
It's shameful, but enjoy your Crocs. Shameful.
But yeah,
kind of like sitting in the line at Cinnabon. It's shameful, but it still tastes good. You know.
To come back to AI, one of the points I wanted
to make what we're talking about
radio to TV to internet to now AI, the new form of communication, is this new form of communication is even faster. So with each iteration of a new communication form, it becomes faster. So we get our information faster and much more of it quicker.
It's also kind of weird how when people saw the internet coming out, they were afraid because it was taking forever, and now it's become instantaneous, basically.
Yeah.
And it's still not fast enough because people are using AI to summarize the information they're getting from the internet.
Yes.
Society probably does need some pause and to slow down on some of this, because honestly, we probably get too much information sent to us all at one time. But, there are people who are even going as far as saying, hey, we should bomb any data centers that are creating AI without following the regulations and laws that they want to put in place. Like that, those are real statements being made out there of how scared people are of what AI could bring. And there's some legitimacy to people's fear here. And we're not saying that there's no legitimacy to what AI is, but I am saying the genie's out of the bottle, and banning open source is not the solution.
Yeah, that's not going to solve anything. And banning AI is not going to solve anything because it's still going to exist in the countries that you can't, regulate and that sort of stuff. So I think that it's definitely here to stay, whether you like it or not. And like I said earlier, protectors, I like it. So,
Well, the other thing to mention is, to the other side's credit, because I like to look at both sides of the argument. When we banned drugs went away, and we have no problem with drugs anymore. So, when you outlaw these things,
when you make a war on drugs, that war is successful always, clearly.
Yes. So if this war on AI happens, it will absolutely be as successful as the war on drugs.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's a pretty fair statement, probably. Like. Based on this conversation, I am now curious if we can take the AI and create a reality show. You could probably sell it to someone in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think that's how they come up with the reality show ideas already. If you've seen these reality shows, like,
I
was hoping it was more like sticky notes, and they just have like topics and adjectives and throw darts at the wall.
Well, in fact, right now, that's why we have a writers and actors strike at the moment, because people are scared of the AI taking over their jobs.
You know what? I understand. Like I was looking into this whole writer's strike, and I think it's very fair that they want to get the just payments for the work that they're giving, and not be because they basically are just kind of being ignored by all these companies, and the studios is not shocking that they're trying to take as much money as they can. It's not surprising. What I think is interesting is that every time the writer strike stuff happens, we get worse and worse content. Like if you go back before like the writer strike of like 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have reality shows everywhere. And now we do. And it's basically, it was like, we need to help the writers get the payments so that they can start making stuff good again and stop letting them make these garbage.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because a lot of the reality shows I heard, I don't know if this is true, I've not researched it, but I heard a lot of the reality shows were pumped up because of the writer's strike, and that they were creating reality shows because you don't need a script.
It's easy to do because you just get some person who's willing to just put themselves on the TV for no reason.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so we've talked enough about TV and stuff, and we've also talked about AI probably enough. So I think this is a very interesting topic, and you've got our opinion, and we want to get your opinion. So go to the forum and tell us what you think about AI, and should it be controlled? Can it be controlled? All that sort of stuff. We'll have a link in the show notes if you would like to check out and give your comments.
Just as a footnote, this topic really made Jill mad to the point, and I hate to bring this up, Jill, because I want everyone to always think of you as this sweet, beautiful person that you truly are. But
Aw.
I want to let people know that there was a curse word in our notes this week.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
technically it was a censored curse
it
word.
was
but
a censored curse word, but I could see through what she meant to say here, and it was bad word.
yeah,
Jill.
I
And
saw this and I thought, did Jill write this or did Ryan write this?
these people really messed up when they made this idea of banning open source to the point where Jill cursed censored in our notes.
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you all know that.
And part of that was because one of the articles we read stated, and Ryan said it earlier, but the article actually states, we may have to bomb rogue data centers to save humanity. What the freaking...
Exactly.
Yeah. And, don't these people know that open source will be the rogue code that saves humanity in the end from the T1s or the T2s or even from the Matrix itself? Follow the white rabbit.
That's it. Now that's how you end that segment. Y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. Making Jill almost curse.
In the news this week, we're going to talk about Zorin OS. Zorin OS, for those who are unfamiliar, is an Ubuntu-based Linux distro that's focused on schools, businesses, and offers a really interesting thing like the Zorin Grid, which easily makes it possible to manage your fleet of PCs, provided you're like an institution like a business or schools. But it's also very good looking, and it has a massively customized version of GNOME. You could look at this and have no idea it's based on GNOME because it looks nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is a very clean experience because people who are coming from Windows can look at it and go, oh, that's familiar to me. And there's also a lot of custom tools and stuff they've made. And they also have like a XFCE Lite version.
Don't
and they
say
just
it so passively, like they also have this XFCE Lite. They also have an XFCE
like that.
version in your face.
I will say that XFCE is not necessarily my favorite DE. However, Zorin does make XFCE look
It's beautiful.
fantastic.
It looks nice.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. But also, they just released a new version with Zorin OS 16.3, and it includes the most asked for feature that they've had from their community, which is the ability to upgrade between different versions without reinstalling.
So this was interesting news to me because I guess in one way I'm calling myself out in that I don't stick with the distro long enough to know that they didn't have a reinstallation option there for Zorin OS. Like I didn't know that was a thing. And I kind of want to know, like, why did it take so long for this? Because this is just something in like you should have in an operating system. What operating system doesn't have an ability to upgrade? I'm glad they have it. Don't get me wrong. This is not me knocking, but I was just surprised like an OS in 2023, 2022, 2021, 1998 would have the ability to automatically upgrade itself to the latest version, you know?
Yeah, there are several out there, Elementary being one and Linux Mint.
Oh, sure. Both of you just knew that, but I didn't. Whatever.
So it's okay. So there's a little more to it than just having upgrades because it's not necessarily because the upgrades themselves are not easy to do or they take forever or anything like that. The real reason is because most of the distributions that are based on Ubuntu are not following the Ubuntu cadence of releasing. They're based on Ubuntu LTS. And Ubuntu LTS is a massive jump from 2 year to 2 years. So if you look at, it's a different version of GNOME, it's a different version of the underlying system of like huge changes to systemd, huge changes to the display servers, huge changes to all sorts of stuff. Like between 2 years to 2 years, that's a massive change. So the upgrade mechanism is a lot more difficult. So it's not exactly the same thing as it doesn't have updates. It does the same way that Linux Mint has updates. The point releases are easily updatable because they're not really changing the core base. And because Zorin changes so much of the DE and so much of the experience, it kind of makes sense that from one base system to another base system, it's pretty difficult to do that. So they have been working on it for about a year of trying to make sure that the upgrade and all the configurations and all the different iterations that people could have of their system would be able to cleanly update without having to go through massive, incurses, command line tools and all that sort of stuff. And like Linux Mint recently has a better version of upgrading between versions or like major versions. but it still requires you to install a package called min install. And then after you do the upgrades, you do uninstall that package. And it's kind of wonky.
As an Arch user, none of this computes. It's like you're speaking another language. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's because
I just run the update command and I'm done.
You get the benefit of all the updates. And when those updates break your system, you get to leave to a different distro.
How dare you? I am in an immutable OS.
Yes.
That's fair. Me too.
You're
I'm
on
using
Blend
Blend
OS
still.
now.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm still on Blend OS, by the way. For those that said I would be switching the distro a week later, you're wrong. Send me my $50. Thank you very much.
I'm also still on Blend OS, so that's not surprising. I'm still
Give me Michael's $50. Thank you very much.
But anyway, so I think it's interesting that Zorin is doing this because it does seem like a massive undertaking. And it at first, when you said, why do they have an upgrade? It should be something that should already exist, right? I completely understand that perspective because I agree this should be something that would be as soon as possible because people having to reinstall is wonky and you could still save your data even with a fresh install. It's just a lot more to do and people who are beginners wouldn't necessarily know how to do that. So I get why that's a problem. But at the same time, I also understand why it took them so long because of how complicated it is to do. And it even takes Ubuntu months to do it because they're doing the LTS to LTS themselves, but they wait for at least 2 to 3 months sometimes between the full upgrade because they have to do all this testing and do all these changes and all that sort of stuff. So for the team of Zorin OS, which is pretty small, I'm not sure exactly how many, but it's not a ton of people. I understand why that would be a big undertaking. And I think it's great that they have added it. But I also wanted to just clarify that it's also every 2 years. So if you have Zorin OS and the next version will probably have a new update from like the 16.3 to 17, that's probably where it's most important because people who have already are on 16 are really just doing the point releases anyway right now. So they're not really going to be affected by it that much. But I think it's still worth noting that I feel like it should be something that every distribution considers, and maybe they could talk to the Zorin people to see how they did it. And like Elementary OS, for example, doesn't have an upgrade system right now.
Are you kidding me?
It doesn't.
I didn't know
Linux Mint has one, but it's a little wonky and it needs to be.
I didn't realize this was
polished.
This complicated. I figured you just replaced system.ini file with system.ini file, and then the new one, and you're good.
You just drop and play. That's why immutable systems aren't necessary, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why they're not necessary.
Well,
so Zorin
that's why
OS,
they're long-term support. So
Zorin OS is amazing. I'm so happy they have that here. Yeah. So I honestly didn't know that was even a thing, but I'm very happy they have it. And they've also done other improvements, like they have their Zorin Connect, which runs commands on your computer. Like they now have a power menu for Android 11 plus. So you can run commands from your phone to your computer, which is really cool. More playback controls when Spotify is playing on your computer, and automatically reconnect to trusted networks in the background if you're on Android 10 plus with their...
Very cool. And also for those who are curious what Zorin Connect is, it is KDE Connect.
And or G Connect.
He preemptively cut me off so I didn't promote something about KDE.
But they add their own features in there. You know, they add some additional
it's also
things.
Open source, so people can, because it might be in KDE Connect as well. I don't know, but it's cool that they're doing it. And also I get why they're having it built in, because the KDE Connect is fantastic and super easy to use if you use KDE Plasma. To get it installed, like last time we talked about Blend OS and I mentioned how I couldn't get it installed. Once I figured it out, which in the tip of the week, I figured it out.
Yes, you did.
And then I tested it. And then after we got off the recording, I rebooted to see if it worked. It worked just fine. It was no big deal. So it was just a basic install a package and it's done. That's not how it works in GNOME. So that Zorin deciding to do their own fork to make it built in and people could just use it, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that was really interesting when I was reading the release notes on the latest Zorin, which had me really thinking like, hey, I want to try Zorin again, you know, but I'm on Blend OS right now, but you know, I was thinking about it. I was just saying, I'm thinking about it, was that their partnership
distro hopper Titus
with laptop with Linux, which I didn't know. They weren't on my radar for whatever reason that laptop with Linux was a thing. And so this is a cool company, and I wanted to let people know about them out there. Laptop with Linux is a place to get Clevo laptops or mini computers that have Linux pre-installed in them. So you can get Zorin OS as an example, pre-installed on one of these. And their prices are really, really reasonable for these. They're starting at just $500. They go all the way up to $1,600 if you want all the bells and whistles and all that stuff. But if you're in the market for a laptop and you want the laptop with Linux in there, check out Laptop with Linux. I mean, it's a pretty good name there, I guess, with that.
I wonder what they say.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You don't have to wonder anymore, Michael. It's Laptop with Linux.
I appreciate you making that clear for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was actually really, really happy about the Zorin OS upgrader because now I can upgrade from Zorin OS 15 Lite with the XFCE desktop to 16.3 on my old iMacs easily. I have Zorin OS on several of my older iMacs, Intel based. And, you know, I've been delaying doing the upgrades because I need to nuke and pave.
See, Ryan, it's not just me who doesn't update.
Well, let's not mix those two up, okay? Let's not.
I mean, it's one of her hundreds of computers,
thousands that Jill has. You know, it takes time for Jill, like an LTS release, to get around to all her computers to update them all.
Just physically, the amount of time it takes to boot them all is understandably why it takes a while. But I just want to point out for those who are curious, Laptop with Linux has laptops with Linux, and they are a European company. For those who are wanting to get System 76 and can't, you can check out this one because they are based in the EU.
Yeah, because System 76 uses Clevos as well. They're working on their own custom laptop, but right now it's Clevos, custom Clevos. So,
and they're a US company. I think that's because of the whole customs thing, and that's why people have wanting to get one, but they couldn't. And this one is, if you're in Europe, that's why I was mentioning it, because it might be easier to get.
And what do they sell again?
Oh, I think they have some products that are like portable computers with Linux on it.
Are we already there? Did AI develop this portable computer thing? Amazing.
Portable computer that you could personally use.
Nice. So, Jill, take us into gaming here. What do you got for us?
Ryan likes to assign me game genres to review that I'm really not a huge fan of, like horror games.
What?
It seems Ryan has
He
decided...
has done that multiple times.
Many times. It seems Ryan has decided to try and scare me again with this game called Terminal 81. As if our main topic of should open source be illegal isn't bad enough, and actually caused me heart palpitations.
So
I'm not. I shouldn't be laughing because it actually did.
Yeah, you got real heart palpitations.
That's not a joke. That's a serious thing. Yeah,
because you were frustrated with the make Linux or open source illegal.
Yeah,
and then I didn't know that though. In fairness to me, that would give you heart palpitations. But I did know you don't like horror games, and I included it anyways. And if you're mad about that, email Michael at michael@tuxdigital.com and tell him how upset you are with the fact he picked this game. Because I, for one, too, am very upset, Jill, that he did that. Continue.
So for those who are curious, if I did, in fact, pick that game, no. Ryan picks the games, and that's how it always has been. And sometimes I'll pick a game and suggest it, and he will ignore it for a while until I picked Brotato.
Yeah.
And we did cover that.
We did cover that. That's a great...
Oh,
by the way, Brotato's in the top 10 on the Steam Deck.
Of course it is. We mentioned it.
Yeah, we mentioned it, so that's automatically what's going to happen.
So the first person game, Terminal 81... no, you don't play this game in the terminal, and
darn it!
Despite what
that
the name says, Terminal 81 it actually describes itself on Steam. Thanks to the financial crisis of 2008, Lorena migrated to Terminal 81 to work. But what seemed like a simple Latin American neighborhood was a dangerous region dominated by a mysterious criminal organization.
Ooh. What I like about this description is you could say 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, now, 2022, 2023 financial
next week
crisis.
Yes.
Lorena had to escape to Terminal 81. Got it. Okay, continue.
So the opening cinematic actually is very much like a visual novel, which tells a good story, and it's very atmospheric. It has really good sound effects and nice music, creepy music that draws you in. The cinematic starts with Lorena on a shaky bus at night on her cell phone with her mom, who was worried about her living and working in a very dangerous area of town. But she needs the money, so takes the risk. And the opening gameplay is Lorena in her new dreary and lonely apartment where she talks to the owner of the apartment and prepares to sleep because her new job at the supermarket starts in the morning. But who could sleep with the constant sounds of police sirens and people screaming? So what happens next?
Hey, Ryan, this seems like a fantastic pick for the show.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I want to tell you why I picked it. I would never pick a game I knew, Jill, that you didn't like, first of all. I would never do that. So the reason I picked this game, besides purposely picking a game I knew you wouldn't like, is because it describes itself as a job simulator.
And yeah, it does. Yeah.
And there's an entire class of games that are there to just simulate jobs. And it made me ask the question, and why I wanted to put it in the show, to ask this question of, why does this game genre exist? Why would we want to simulate the torture that is having a job?
Also, I saw one game that was a simulator that was interesting, and it was the PC Maker simulator.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And people really like that one. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to get that. But then I saw another one that was Mowing Grass Simulator.
Oh, yes. That was around.
Imagine if you just did this stuff in real life and then you would get this money as compensation, and it would be just as satisfying in my mind as the job simulator. And they got like Chef Simulator. I'm like, go downstairs, pull a knife out of your drawer, cut some vegetables up, throw them in a pot,
some onions,
and then you get to eat it afterwards. It's not just a video game. You know,
that's crazy.
The simulators have taken off since VR too.
Or like the pressure washing car simulator. Like, just go wash your car.
Can they create a podcast host simulator and people could pretend to be us?
Yeah.
Or we could just use it to automatically create it with the AI and stuff.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
So with the game Terminal 81,
it probably is that, right? By the way.
I was actually happy.
There's a YouTube simulator, by the way. There's a YouTuber simulator.
And we talked about that one too about a year ago.
Yeah.
So,
I forgot we talked about it because it's so ridiculous.
Yes. It was on sale the other day. So I was actually...
Why do you know that?
I looked recently. I had bought it, when it was full price, but now it's on sale. So I was actually happy that the visual novel aspect in the opening cinematic continues through the rest of the game, and you can choose your next move with prompts like a text adventure.
Hold on, Jill. Hold on. I don't mean to bring this back up, but you bought YouTube Simulator and you're literally a YouTuber. Like, why?
Yeah.
The fact that you bought this game is freaking blowing my mind and is way more important to talk about than this game at this point. Like,
so sometimes Ryan gives games to Jill that are ridiculous and she doesn't buy them and she doesn't play them because they are and also, just so you know, Jill, you don't have to play horror games. If he gives you a horror game, you can just say, hey, guess what, Ryan? I didn't play this. We're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
You can do that. That's fine.
Okay.
Don't take me off the subject, Michael, here.
But I also do want to, I'm very curious, of all the games that you didn't buy, why did you buy this one?
You are a YouTube simulator. Like, you are a YouTube creator. Why did you buy the game, Jill?
I guess because because I usually buy the games that we're going to talk about on the show.
Okay. All right.
Play them. And that one was very well done and it had really good reviews.
Did you enjoy doing what you already do in real life?
It was really strange. Yeah, it was like a mirror.
Hey, Ryan, so we now know that there's a horror genre that she does not like.
Yes.
And we also know job simulators that she does like. So the next one needs to be some ridiculous job simulator.
Yeah.
That's what we have. A ridiculous horror job simulator.
This is like a pretend job simulator.
Yeah.
Like this is it like starts as that and then it becomes like a terrible life simulator.
Yeah.
But I said I don't know
Jill,
why.
Jill really likes this game and you're interrupting her. Michael.
I'm interrupting. You're the one who.
Well, listen, that question had to be asked, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Let's get back to this horror game that everyone is so enticed to know.
Okay, so with Terminal 81, honestly, I actually really like this game because it has a good story and it is very atmospheric, despite it being in the horror genre.
She didn't say that.
I don't like the gore in it. As you progress through the story, it gets a little more gory. but I love the attention to detail and the atmosphere. They nailed it with this one. It's a simple
Very
game,
cool.
but they did a very good job. And it makes me curious to see what honestly happens next. So I'm going to continue to play it. And
you're welcome, Jill.
Yeah, I thought it was a good one.
Wasn't the outcome I was going for. I was going for the more Zeb being mad and saying next. But hey, every once in a while you fall into one of these.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
So,
cool.
I actually agreed with one of the reviewers of the game that stated this game was amazing. I usually hate playing horror games, but this one made me less iffy about them. 10 of 10 recommend. Heart.
Nice.
So go grab Terminal 81 for $4.99 on Steam.
Not a bad price.
Yeah.
There you go. So you can also grab this software spotlight that we have called Facteur.
Oh, what a transition.
Yeah.
So good.
Facteur
What was it called?
Is a really cool... Yeah.
How do you spell that?
It's Facteur. And I have no idea.
Facteur.
Facteur.
It's a Facteur.
So this Facteur lets you send bulk emails out using templates that you create. Now, I know we all generally hate these kind of bulk emails that come in and you just delete them because they're unsolicited. However, I envision this is a use case where you're doing newsletters.
Sure.
Or Tux Digital even, where we acquired emails at the Scale event. People gave us their emails. We didn't go steal it through telemetry or anything. Right. They gave us their emails.
Volunteered.
And they want some updates, want us to know different shows we may have going on. And so we could use something like Facteur to send all of them an email to say, hey, here's some cool things going on you want to check out. You may be able to use it for your clients as well in the business that you're in, as long as you've asked them for permission, because getting unsolicited emails, it's very rude and nobody likes it. So don't do that. But Facteur allows those who've gotten permission to bulk email. Very cool.
And also, when you do send that message, you need to put in the bottom that says sent by Facteur.
Facteur.
And spell it phonetically based on our pronunciation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the tip of the week this week is something you should not do. And for some reason, it's the tip. Ryan, why is this the tip of the week? For those who don't know, that most of the time, Ryan comes up with these tips for the show. I sometimes have them, but most of the time, it's Ryan.
99.9%.
92.6%.
99.98.
96.4%. So anyway, so Ryan comes up with this, and this time I basically wanted to just ask you on the show, why is this a tip? Because he's basically saying that you shouldn't do it, first of all, and that it's instead of using a password to get into your desktop, to use a PIN instead with this.
Well, no, I'm not saying do that. I started out the tip and trick with literally, please do not follow this tip and trick.
Well, that doesn't help me make fun of you, to be upfront about.
I have a trigger over this. This is like a trigger thing for me. It sets me off. So there's this thing in Windows, okay, where if you've not used Windows lately, there's this thing in Windows, and it's in corporations too, where they allow people in corporations where you're trying to secure your information. You really want to keep your information secure, to utilize these pins. Probably banks allow their employees to use this pin system. And the idea behind it is you can quickly get into your system by just using numbers like 121212 or 141414 or just 11111 if you want to quickly get into your computer, because passwords are so inconvenient and 11111 is so easy to remember. And so this article came out that I saw that was like, hey, do you want to use the PIN number system for Linux? Here's how you do it. And my mind exploded. Like Jill, I started to feel some heart palpitations and I got angry. I started turning a little red because I'm like, why? Why would we want users to utilize this password tool, the PIN system, which is entirely inferior to get into their systems?
For those who are curious, we'll have a link for the actual information. We're not going to tell you here because it's not worth doing. But the idea is that the PIN system does not have root privileges. So you would be able to get in the machine, but you wouldn't be able to alter anything in the machine. So that's, in one way, is kind of good. But the other way is that they'd still be able to steal every part of your data.
All your files, all your emails, everything is right there.
Like root doesn't require it's the only thing to change the system. Like to actually get your data is what they want in the first place. So it's not a great idea. But it's also kind of funny because when you first mentioned that we were going to talk about this, I was thinking, what is even the point? Because you can just make a password. This
1111.
You could make your system password a terrible password. And then I was like, okay, so it's root, but not really root. Like, okay, I get it. That's kind of better. But then it's also complicated to set up. So it's like, why would anyone ever do?
Yeah,
so it's just funny to me. And also, I think that we should probably just kind of move on and not talk about this particular thing anymore. We'll just put a pin in it for here. And then
I see what you did there. That was pretty good. So yes, if you're using the pin in Windows, stop. It's completely insecure. If you want to use the pin in Linux, don't, because it's completely insecure. And that's really the tip and trick of this week is don't use pins as your password.
Don't use pins for anything unless it's your something ATM you also machine. Physically have to have, like the ATM card.
Exactly. Physically that's kind of a 2FA there. Then
in a way.
Two-factor authentication. If you had to do your password and a pin, that would be okay. But you know how people are with
or
pin.
If you had to have like a USB stick that you had to plug in before you could do the pin. It'd be okay. Mm-hmm. But in a way, it'd be okay.
That's it. That's the end of our show. So a big thank you
that's not the end of our show, is it? We have so much content that we could give you, but you're going to have to come back next week.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the show. A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, as long as you're not using a pin, we love your faces. And if you want to watch this show live, you can become a patron of Destination Linux. Go to tuxdigital.com/Discord as well to come and hang out with us. And patrons, they even got a special room in that Discord thing there that you can hang out in and stuff. So all kinds of awesome perks for patrons to check out.
Yeah. tuxdigital.com/membership to become a patron. You get access to all of that. And we have 2 new benefits as well if you're a patron. You can send us comments that were already in the community feedback, but we're also going to make it possible for patrons to be bumped up to the tippity top of the emails.
The tippity top?
The tippity top of the emails on the show. So you get that. Plus, we're also working on ad-free versions of the show. So you get all of this, including the ad-free and the tippity top of the feedback.
What does that mean? That means if I go to the comment section, I have something I really want to tell Michael because I want to yell at him for his comments on how he loves telemetry. And I go there and I can select that I'm a patron. And then once that's verified, that email is the most likely to be next read on the next show. And we can make fun of Michael immediately. That's an incredible perk.
That is a scenario that could happen, but I would prefer it to not be that particular.
No, don't worry. They always blame me for everything you say.
That is true. So in that case, feel free to blame Ryan for everything that I say if you don't agree with it. So tuxdigital.com/membership to blame Ryan. And also, just to be clear, Ryan said that thing earlier about even if you use pins, we still like you if you use pins. Just stop using pins.
Yeah. We'll like you once you stop using pins, to be clear.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
We have some other stuff that you can check out to support the show, like the swag that we have. Like I'm wearing this Linux is Everywhere t-shirt. Jill's wearing some stuff. She also has mugs and coasters, all sorts of stuff. We have tuxdigital.com/store where you can get some hoodies, mugs, hats, stickers, and so much more at tuxdigital.com/store.
And make sure to check out all our wonderful shows here on Tux Digital. We have the Pseudo Show, This Week in Linux, the DOS Geek Channel, Linux Out Loud, Hardware Addicts, Linux Saloon, and our newest show, Fit and Fueled. Everyone head to tuxdigital.com and subscribe to all these awesome shows. And don't forget to leave a rating on your favorite app so others can discover the power of open source and keep those penguins marching in the full Monty of Linux and open source awesome sauce. Everybody have an awesome week. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next week.
Love you all.
Most of you. I'm not using pins.